Well, Darren and Robert and Ryan, I'd like to welcome you guys, and I'd like to thank you very much for being willing to sit in on this interview. And I know that the Occupy movement in general has had a lot of press, over the past months. Some of it's been very complimentary, some of it's been critical, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to help those who are going to be seeing this video to understand the movement better. I'm going to ask some general questions, and so that people can clearly understand where you're coming from. Well, the first question is, how did you guys get involved in Occupy Kelowna, and what's your role in it?
Wow. I saw it on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a challenge that went across the entire nation after Occupy Wall Street started up in, when did it start?
It started a month before, about 6 weeks before we started here.
Okay, so October 15th, there was a challenge for everyone to support Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street wasn't getting any media. They weren't getting any coverage on the issues,
Yes.
the obvious issues they were presenting.
Yes.
And so there was a challenge for the entire
World.
planet to support them on October the 15th.
Wow.
So I noticed on the internet, on Facebook, that 2 people had started up Occupy Kelowna groups at that time. One previous activist who worked on when things were prorogued in Kelowna,
Yes.
and another individual who ended up heading up the local Facebook chapter of Occupy Kelowna. So I joined up with those groups, and boy, things really took off from there.
It just started growing then.
Yeah, there was 1,000 people connected to the original group.
Wow. So on one of your communiques, I forget which one it was, I think it was from Wes Clement, I believe.
Yeah.
He said that you guys engage in something called decentralized, what did you use it? Decentralized gathering or something to that effect. Decentralized action, that's what he said.
That's right.
Yeah, could you kind of explain that a little bit, what that's about?
The model of operations was to be more or less leaderless, so that you're not looking to one person, or you're not looking to one small group.
Yes.
Everybody would form a consensus on what was going on. This proved to be very challenging, okay, because trying to get 100 people or 1,000 people to agree on any one direction
Yes.
stood in the way of a lot of things getting out, especially a cohesive message to the media. It's hard to get 10 people to agree on anything, 100%. And that's what they were trying to achieve. So it was kind of a nice dream. It proved to be ineffective though, and unmanageable.
So has that been shed now? Are you in a different kind of leadership, a different kind of organizing? Or?
Well, right now we've adopted the principles of a society, a formal society in British Columbia as defined by the government.
Yeah.
In order to form a non-profit society. Therefore, we've had to elect and name people to fill specific positions.
Yes.
However, the democracy, the actual consensus, is
Yes.
still carrying on right now.
Great.
So even though you have a title, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have authority, but you do have responsibility.
So it's a type of servant leadership, so to speak. Is that?
Servant leadership, that was one of the models that you look at, when you're trying to look at this. It's pretty hard to put an old tag on a new item, because this has never really been attempted in a real time.
Yeah.
And that's why it's kind of fascinating. I had that one brought up, the servant model. Okay, a lot of people, of course, will follow down communistic trails at that point. Or, some of the more outrageous isms that we have out there seem to get attached to this for some reason. But this is something new. This is a new way to really look at things and be accountable to the people who are part of your group.
It sure sounds like it. So, can you please tell us, what does Occupy Kelowna want Kelowna's to understand?
What Occupy Wall Street wants people to understand.
I'm thinking in particular here in Kelowna, in terms of the Occupy Kelowna movement. What do the Occupy Kelowna movement participants want Kelowna's to understand?
Yeah, Right here in Kelowna, the poverty gap is just as wide as it is anywhere else in Canada. So the poverty gap is the most important thing to understand that exists right here in Kelowna streets. We have 1,500 homeless in a city where it's illegal to be homeless. Okay, it's actually against the law to have a blanket on the ground here in Kelowna, and that's an obvious example of the poverty gap in action.
Yeah.
So the most important thing to understand is that we educate people on the effects, the mechanism, and the solutions towards solving the poverty gap on a municipal level.
So here's what I'm understanding so far. You're saying that one of the things that you want to do in Kelowna is to raise consciousness, to raise awareness
Yes.
about what's happening in the community, especially with regard to the gap between the rich and the poor, so to speak. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you guys deliver the message here in Kelowna?
Well, we do weekly Speaker's Corner at Kerry Park. We make announcements to the media. We do press releases. And we engage people on a personal level on the street.
Yeah, every week we're going out.
Yeah.
We're staging in different areas.
Yes.
Traditionally, we go down to Kerry Park for Speaker's Corner.
Yes.
Something that we adopted from Britain, you know, where they have Speaker's
Hyde
Corner
Park,
there
yeah.
at Hyde Park. And Kerry Park is our Hyde Park at points, where we stand up and exercise free speech and get people engaged and informed on what the real weight, you know, the disparity that's occurring right now.
And talking about, you mentioned Kerry Park. One of the posts that I read in Castanet from a fellow in your movement talked about tension rising in the movement and them not wanting to kind of get involved in any sort of civil disobedience and violence and all that sort of stuff. Does that tension still exist?
There's, in any working group, there's always tension. That's not a problem. The problem is when the tension prevents people from standing up for what's right. And that's what I've noticed the most about it all. There's been a lot of opinion on what direction and how we do things. Some people are really, you know, they're very gung-ho. We've got people all the way up from let's burn down City Hall all the way down to people that just want to save the bunnies. Okay?
How do you deal with the let's burn down City Hall people?
We will never advocate violence. We will never advocate destruction. And that is one of our firm mandates. The one thing that the establishment cannot handle is peaceful resistance. They've proven that all the way through the Occupy movements throughout the world right now. You see that the establishment brings out riot police and tear gas, and they're facing peaceful protesters whom they have immense problems dealing with. That's our most effective weapon. But that's taking off of the leaders who led before us. We're talking all the way back to biblical days, and the leadership shown there, all the way up to our current, you know, the civil rights movement in the 60s, Gandhi in Africa or in India. We have many leaders who've proven to us that that's effective and that that's going to work.
Yeah,
so that's the model that we're following.
So nonviolence is the model that you're following.
Absolutely.